We've just had time for one more question. Gentlemen here? We haven't got a microphone now, so
I would like the candidates to give me their ideas of how they would intend to reduce or eliminate the overall debt that is on the Isle of Man from the civil servants pension scheme and the electricity authority loan.
thank James and stuff.
Right, yes, the public debt, MEA debt, is it half a billion?
180 million.
No, more than that.
180 million bond, 2033 bullet payment. Plus that from the capital benefit interest.
I thought it was two, isn't there two separate loans?
There's an 80 million there, no, 180, but the all of them absorbed into government capital fund there.
Anyway, there's a lot of money. And the public sector pensions liabilities. The public sector pensions liabilities initially is probably the biggest problem because, as I understand it, and I'm not an accountant, if you look at the big book, basically we are lashing through our reserves. Now, as all the manifestos are coming out, various different people have assessed this. Various different people have had various different assessments on it. My understanding is we're going to run out of money. Now, it could be that I've misread that, but that's basically my understanding. How do we solve it? It's only going to be solved by a renegotiation of that deal, basically. Now, the people who have those entitlements, they want those entitlements, obviously. But if we don't fix this problem and we actually run out of money, the entitlement's not really very much use, is it? And there could be very significant social consequences of that. The people who are paying for those entitlements, they want to know that they're getting a fair deal. So again, from my point of view, it comes back to an open renegotiation. Now, I want to pay taxes for the services that I want. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to hospital to witness a C-section. I can tell you, when you are sat there with those people, you want the best people in the world, and you don't care what they cost. You're willing to pay taxes for those services. You don't want to feel that the deal that you are paying for is over-generous. So from my point of view, it has to be a renegotiation, because ultimately, if it isn't renegotiated, both sides are going to lose out, potentially. Now, if you've got those liabilities, you might want to hang on to them and negotiate as hard as you can. But ultimately, if you don't give and the whole thing collapses, what's your liability worth then? Now, nobody really knows what will happen if we do actually default. There are, one potential theory is that the UK would have to step in, because ultimately the UK are responsible for our good governance. Now, again, we're talking pie in the sky now, but as a basic answer to your question, a renegotiation. In terms of the MEA debts, I think that the MEA debts can be reconfigured to spread them over a longer period, and ultimately coming back to my point before about how we actually produce electricity. The problem is that we can't produce cheaper electricity for us because of those debts. Now, if the debt is reconfigured and we start producing our own electricity, I don't see any reason why we can't pay for it. Because we have an energy from waste plant, which again you paid for, £40-something million, which was then sold to the Isle of Man Bank, but ultimately, you paid for it. And that facility runs way below optimum, as I understand it. Again, I'm just talking about the information that's available in the public now. Now, if that facility was brought up, we have a neighbour who is about to run out of production. They're going to be desperate for energy. We have massive oversupply of energy production capabilities. Now, I don't see why we can't join up those dots and actually make these bits of kit pay for themselves instead of us all paying for them, because the potential is there. Again, going back to the AEA report, the gas power station and the incinerator both run way below optimum, and we have a neighbour who is desperate for energy. It comes back to political. Why isn't that decision being made? Because of the way our political system operates. That's it. There is a massive problem with those debts, and we haven't grasped it. And the danger is that we don't grasp it, because you're about to make a gamble. You're about to elect 2 people from here, 24 all around the island. It's a gamble. You don't know what's going to happen next. You have no say in the policy direction. But you do. You really do. You are the people who can change it. But only if you demand a different kind of deal. Because if the deal that you've had for the last however many sessions goes through again, you have no say. So there is no way that anybody on this panel can answer that question for you with any. Yes. So that, yeah, basically you have to demand a different kind of deal if you want to ensure, all of you, that those problems are solved in a way that benefits you.
I really wish I had more time to answer this one. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep this short and punchy. So, the budget, we've talked about it. Again, I'll raise it. Zero-based budgeting. It's going to create monies for us to actually pay down some of these debts, to ring-fence our essential services. Dong Energy, the wind farm that's been proposed. Now, again, I mentioned earlier, if we tax the activity, instead of just leasing the seabed, we can make a lot of money off the back of this. I think I estimated something like 40 million a year we could make. That's going to help pay down our debt. Now, contrary to what we were talking about earlier with the whole green aspect, there is a gas reserve off the East Coast, and there's monies that could be made off the back of that if the government have decided to go ahead with actually bringing a company in to extract that gas. Again, tax the activity. If it's going to go ahead, let's get what we can out of it. Now, I'd prefer to see us go green, I would, and I mentioned earlier about green technologies, solar roads, kinetic roads, and so on. And all of these things, the wind, solar, and even the gas, it's going to produce energy for us, and that's energy we can export. As James rightly mentioned, we can export that for extra revenues. Very quickly, moving on, I mentioned in my opening statement that I was going to run that 85% of students are not returning to the island. This has since been proven in various different ways. If we bring these students in, if we get them working, if we find jobs for them, as Minister Skelly was saying before, jobs are key to the economy. If we bring these students back and we find jobs for them, we've got extra tax revenues. Extra tax revenues means more that we can do with our money, or more money to actually do things like pay down debt. Healthcare, going back again to an earlier question, medicinal cannabis, if we were to grow cannabis and we were to export medicinal cannabis oil, there's revenues again that we can use to be paying down debt or to go into essential services like healthcare. Again, with healthcare, if we had the CQC, the NHS Development Trust, we're actually putting in place the right legislative bodies to actually have the hospital run properly, reduce the management there, bring back the matron, all these kind of things. That's going to reduce costs. More money's freed up all of a sudden. And finally, just as regards Brexit. Now, we talked about Brexit before, but let's also remember that just recently the interest rates dropped again to 0.25%. Should we not try and refinance these debts now? Okay, I'll leave it there because I could just go on about this all day and I don't want to bore you, well, any more than I have. Okay, thank you.
So, in relation to the MEA debt, in simple terms, I believe we should pay it. Then, because obviously if you're loaning money, it's more expensive, it costs you more. So, but how we got into the situation of actually being in that, which for the rules of the governing body wasn't supposed to be possible. So, we have to look at transparency in the agreements that were associated with that, and a lot of people say, well, commercial agreements can't be transparent. Well, the government, I mean, we are your government, or not yet, but I mean, some of these individuals here are. And if you want transparency, then that is something that you can choose, and that is something that a government can then provide. Because it was very disappointing, the whole thing that surrounded that. So that's in the short term, that's obviously simple economics, which I'm sure everyone understands. There was a pension presentation by Mr. Bell a couple of weeks ago, actually I think it was last week, and he walked through where they were up to in this present situation. In broad lines, there are some changes, but the chief one is that it's obviously been increased by 2 years. So you have to work 2 years longer. And this is obviously going back to the fact that we're not balancing, so how are we going to balance it going forward? If the economy improves, we can pay it all, but we don't know. So a lot of factors here that we don't know. I'm standing on the principle that people that have worked for a long time for the government have taken a low wage, because they haven't worked in the private sector, should be paid their pension. because that was the deal. That's what the government can't sort of escape that deal. If you've done a long period of work, and we should encourage people and pensions, then that comes with that field. However, there may have to be some negotiation. So I would say in the coming 5 years, because it's on every couple of years we have to sort of start reviewing this of how we're going to balance it, I would probably say the executive, the top end, was probably over generous. And that's where would be the room for negotiation. Thank you.
Forgive me if I speak a bit quickly, because I can talk on this one for 12 hours as well. And the answer to the civil service pension scheme is little by little. And I know that's not a particularly sexy answer. Leo's got this, right, we have legal advice, we have to make sure that we honour the commitments to our pensioners and our existing staff for promises that have been made over 40 years. A lot of promises have been made to our public servants. It's not their fault that no one was putting the money aside for it. I would say that the commutation factor in order to convert an ongoing pension into a lump sum is generous, and that needs to continue to come down. And there needs to be a continuing renegotiation downwards of the benefits and an increase in the retirement age and contributions. It's what's happening in the rest of society. It needs to be reflected in the public service as well. The current system is certainly not sustainable, and there is a big legacy issue there to solve. We have made big progress in terms of new starters, in terms of the sustainability of that scheme, the cost envelope approach, which means that we now have a very clear way forward about how it will be funded and what promises have been made to those people who are starting working for government for the first time. The other issue about the MEA, obviously I wouldn't start from here, and I was one of 4 politicians at the time back in 2007 who voted against the legalisation of the MEA loans. I don't think it was a good idea. I think certainly by having an accountant in the House of Keys for the last 10 years, it has improved things such as corporate governance, it has improved accounting practice. We are finally getting around to reporting our accounts according to international financial reporting standards rather than on a cash basis, and that's when you start to notice these hidden liabilities such as ongoing pension costs, because they're not as noticeable in the cash accounts. But when you look at the long-term liabilities, and the public sector pension liability alone is around £4 billion over the next 60 or 70 years, but it's there, and it's money that is going to need to be found. We should be doing more to refinance the MEA debt. It is, however, a bullet repayment in, I think, 2033 or 2034, so it's a lump sum at that point rather than now. And I can't see that there's going to be much incentive for the banks to renegotiate debt because they're currently getting 5.625% for it. But and these are the issues that we faced and that I faced when we came in 2006. They are going to take time. There is no quick solution. There's no sexy solution. But one thing that is certainly being advocated by some politicians around the island, I certainly haven't heard it from any of the candidates here, is just close the scheme. Just close this final salary pension scheme. You do that, you need to find £44 million a year in cash right now in order to pay for a defined contribution scheme and to cover the difference between those contributions that are currently coming in from those who are working in the public sector to help pay for the pensions of those who have worked for the public sector. So it's not a simple solution. It is going to take time to work out, but little by little we will get there.
Very, very good question. Arguably the best question, because these are the 2 biggest issues that's been with this government for many, many years. And certainly, arguably, should have been dealt with some time ago. Because what has happened? We've heard a lot about the MEA debt here. And these 2 issues have been taken on by this last administration. The MEA debt is actually now consumed within the merger with the Water Authority, the MUA as they are now known. We now have a trading business model that will actually fulfil that liability. There are a number of issues. Julian just highlighted there that we could not get out of, and now that has actually put that in a viable financial position going forward. The second point with regards to public sector pensions, that is undoubtedly being the greatest and the biggest issue that's been dealt with by, or rather taken on by this particular government. Why? Because it really needed to be done. The liability is built up over decades. And to be quite honest, those people that actually signed up for this, it wasn't their fault. It wasn't the politicians that just came in fault. But we had to be fair, honest and responsible. And you must think that they just agreed to new terms not that many years ago. And again, we're coming back, knocking on the door and saying, we need new terms. It's not sustainable. And that's why we were trying to be fair, honest in actually bringing that forward. It's been a very, very difficult journey to get to the juncture where we are actually at now. But ultimately, those who are in the scheme are actually going to have to work longer to contribute more and to get less. So it's a step in the right direction in terms of sustainability. And I have to say that as the watchword going forward, we must look at sustainability. It's took decades to build up, it will take decades to balance too. So the other key element to this is every 3 years there will be a review. And that's the opportunity that we can go back, and if it's not actually paying its way, it's not being sustainable, then we can actually sit down and see if we can actually renegotiate that with the unions. Not an easy journey, not difficult, a very, very difficult task, but I believe we have made a very, very strong and positive step towards sustainability in both these areas.